There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cameron Chronicles. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, joined by my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you doing, man? It's been a minute.
I'm good, yeah. Good to be back. It's been over a month, so excited to be back.
Yeah, it has. We've had winter break. We're back, ready for the second semester. Since the last time we recorded a podcast, that was ahead of the Auburn game, and Duke hasn't lost since then. So maybe it's bad to record another podcast, but whatever. We're doing it anyway. Duke is in the midst of an 11-game winning streak. Started with Seattle and that big Cameron Indoor win against Auburn, 84-78. Got going on the road against Louisville to start ACC play, and then over break, a combination of some nice non-conference wins and then solid ACC play. And that's led up to the most recent game, an 89-54 demolition of Miami at home, which was definitely a statement by the Blue Devils. We'll kind of recap that 11-game win streak as a whole, and then look ahead a little bit to some big ACC games coming up for the Blue Devils, and then in addition talk about the league as a whole. Lots been going on in ACC basketball. So yeah, should be a fun episode. Glad to be back. But first, as always, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise in the world that comes to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch. I'll start off with just some overall takeaways from that win streak. Caleb, is there anything in particular that has stood out to you from any of those games? And we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so early in the streak, obviously Auburn was the big game, and then we talked about Louisville some as maybe like a trap game for the ACC. Duke's had some problems with ACC road openers in the past. In both of those games, Duke got down double digits pretty early on. But for me, just the way that they were able to fight back in both games, it kind of came different ways. Obviously, Auburn, everyone knows Isaiah Evans hit 6 threes in the first half, and just kind of an offensive explosion from a role player, which just happens sometimes. And then Louisville wasn't really anybody in particular, just kind of willed their way back into the game. They shot under 30% from three. Louisville just kind of cooled off from three. They started out making everything. So just for me to see them, get down early and not lose confidence and be able to come back and, sustain or weather the storm and then get 2 big wins.
Yeah, that one at Louisville was really impressive and looks better every day. We'll talk about Louisville a little bit later, but their length is really tough to guard, and they've come together as a team of a lot of transfers. In that Auburn game and throughout, I think one theme that we've seen from Duke is the offense just take new heights. And I think that's based on a couple of reasons. One, I think the roles of each player, role definition, I guess, for lack of a better term, has been really, really strong of late. And especially in Auburn, you had obviously Isaiah Evans go off, but I think every player kind of played to their strengths. So you had Cooper do what Cooper does, right? But Caleb Foster was driving to the basket. Con Knippel didn't hit very many threes there early, but he made some big buckets inside. He's a really tough finisher. Sion made some big shots when it mattered, but also was a great facilitator. And then, Mason has slowly, we'll talk about Mason Gillis a little bit later, but he's slowly developed his shot from behind the arc and been a 3 and D type of guy for Duke. But every player has kind of fit into their piece, especially of late. And I think the backcourt when Tyrese and Sion, the first game that Sion started was the Auburn game, but when they're playing together, their chemistry to start off the game has been tremendous, and I think has really provided a spark for this team offensively.
Yeah, going to what you just said about Sion and Tyrese, I think also something to note later on in that streak is we kind of see Con Knippel just become the point guard sometimes, especially Georgia Tech game. I think he had 3 or 4 pick and roll lobs to Common Malawach in the second half. And Coach Shire said if it was working, they'll keep going back to it. And
check out the Con Knippel pick and roll film room on the Chronicles.
Yeah, he's obviously they've worked on it a lot, and so I think for Duke to have 3 guys in the starting lineup who can initiate the offense at any time, I guess 4 if you count Cooper Flagg, is obviously a weapon that not a lot of teams have.
Yeah, and obviously the offense is better when the shots are going in, but even with a strong three-point shooting team, I'm thoroughly impressed with how they move the ball around the arc. Duke in the last recently, I guess, is in the 95th percentile in assists per game. They really move the ball, and I think Miami game kind of exemplified that with a season high, I think, in assists that game. That was not a great defensive team. Duke had 25 assists against the Hurricanes, but even so, in other games, you'll see a player pass up a good look for a great look, and it's really helped a lot of other players gain confidence from behind the arc, knowing that they had their teammates' trust in that. So that's been fun to watch. I know you want to talk about this later, but kind of the elephant in the room with this within this win streak was that Notre Dame game. Cooper Flag, 42 bomb, broke a bunch of records. What did you see from Cooper in that game, and what makes him so difficult to guard?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of seen him do a lot of different things, a lot of different games. He kind of just does whatever the team needs. But in that game, they didn't have anyone that could really match up with him size wise. And so he just kept driving, and they just kept fouling him. They couldn't do anything. I mean, so he just kept driving in, and I think his handling has got a little better over the course of the season. So he's had great success driving to the basket, and then I think he was 16 for 17 on free throws. So if you can make all your free throws, I mean, it's we'll take a foul every single time. And obviously, I think the big thing for him is we had a lot of questions about his 3-point shot. The first half of the season, it was struggling to say the least, and now he's shooting a pretty good percentage, at least in the last month or so, over this win streak, and so that's been a big boost, just for floor spacing and then for him personally.
Yeah, I agree. His shot, nothing was essentially wrong with it. It was very mental, and he admitted it himself. It was just like, once you see one go down, you've seen that with Konkanippel. Shooting is so mental, and when Cooper is starting to hit those, you just see the stroke looks completely different when he's confident with it. He he follows through, and it's nice. And I think the biggest thing for Cooper has been his efficiency. It's been off the charts the past few games, and just shot selection, knowing where to find his spots. He's a difficult shot taker in the sense that he'll shoot a lot of like 18-footers or 11-footers. That's his game, and he knows how to get there. But he doesn't do too much to get there as well. So I've been impressed with that. And against Notre Dame, that was incredible, even as Notre Dame was hitting threes all over the place that made it a closer game than it probably should have been for a 42-point game by Cooper. But again, just outside of his scoring too, he'll just impact every single thing on the stat sheet. He leads the team in rebounds and assists as well. So he's just been a phenomenal addition for the Blue Devils this year.
Yeah, I think going off that, I think we've seen over this win streak, teams have tried to attack him a bunch of different ways. I know Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech in particular tried to throw a zone at Cooper Flag, and he was just ready for it. I mean, they put him right in the middle and just let him go to work. He's a plenty good enough facilitator for him to make the right play, and we saw that in Miami a lot. He had a lot of assists against Miami, just finding the open guy, extra pass. So I think he's maybe the best player in the country, and obviously a difficult guy to game plan for. And so we'll see what teams throw at him the rest of the way.
Yeah. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. We talked a lot about offense, just kind of overshadowing how good this defense has been. It's been great all season, obviously, but especially of late, few games that come to mind. I mean, the Pitt game, that is a very, very talented offensive team, and holding them to 47 points is very impressive. I also thought against SMU, another talented team, holding them to 62. That was thoroughly impressive. And just the length of this team defensively, obviously, Malik Brown's injury, we'll talk about that a little bit later, might impact some things. But what's impressed you the most about the defense from Duke, and why do you think this is such a tough team to score against?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious thing is they're the second biggest team in the country. I mean, they have a matchup advantage on every single team they play, just about. And it's not that they're just like tall and can't move. Everyone in the lineup is fluid on defense, and obviously the communication and execution is there. For me, a game that sticks out is we talk about Malik Brown. The first half of that Auburn game against Janai Broome,
Yeah.
Malik had him visibly frustrated in the building, and Broome doesn't get a lot of games like that where someone gets in his head and kind of causes problems. And we saw the same thing against Kansas and Hunter Dickinson. Malik just has an ability to deflect the ball and just frustrate the opposing team, which is obviously a good value to have. But now with Malik out, I guess we'll get to it. I still think the post defense will be just fine.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there's so much length on this team, but the guard defense as well sometimes goes under the radar. I mean, Sion James and Tyrese Proctor is not a great backcourt to go against if you're starting off. Sion has made life hell for a lot of opposing guards, and then Tyrese will come in and provide a big spark defensively and just make some really quality plays. I remember against Pitt, he was him and Sion were tasked to guard Jalen Lowe at times, and he's one of the best scorers in the ACC, and they really did a good job running him off the three-point line, but also ensuring that when he gets into the lane, he'll have a tough shot, either having to go on top of Cooper Flagg or Malawach, which is definitely difficult in and of itself. But he was held to 3 for 12 from the floor, and then Ish Leggett, another great pit score, was 2 for 15. And so if those two guards are shooting like that with defense, you can beat about anyone. And so, yeah, this defense has been really, really impressive to start the year.
Yeah, I think one more thing, just not even like talent wise, it's just the level of effort on this team. I
Mhm.
think is on defense, especially, is just much
Yeah.
higher than years past. Like I remember I covered the Georgia Tech game down in Atlanta, and they were up by 20 points, and like Khan was diving on the floor for steals and like trying to get out on the fast break. And so I think you just like when you watch them, you can just tell that like they obviously put a lot of pride in defense. And I think they've said that throughout the year that they know they can defend better than any team in the country, and so when teams come to Cameron or when they go on the road, they just know the defense will travel, and it obviously has thus far.
Yeah, totally agree with that, and you'll see Shire get animated with them as well, and um, he'll definitely tell the team when they're not playing great defensively effort wise, and usually if it's in the first half, they'll turn around in the second half. But yeah, I've been impressed with that as well. Okay, let's talk about Malik. So last Monday, this Monday, we got word that Malik Brown would be out for an extended period. Shire said weeks, maybe more, was essentially what he said at that ACC coaches availability. It's a sprained knee. Don't really want to speculate too much, but let's just say he's out for an extended period, a few weeks. Obviously, that creates a hole for this team on defense. The one game Duke has played without Malik has been Miami, and looks fine, but Miami's Miami, so we'll see about that later on. But still a talented offensive team. What do you think Malik's absence does for this team, and maybe what can Duke do to try to fill the hole that Malik Brown will leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think Malik is maybe the best defender in the ACC. So obviously, when you're missing a
Mm-hmm.
Defensive Player of the Year candidate, that's a big hit. But I mean, Duke's team defense is good enough to where I think against most teams they shouldn't have too much of a problem. The biggest thing for me is just Kamal Malawich has been really, really good here in the last few games, but he just has to stay out of foul trouble if Malik's going to be out for an extended period. Last couple games, I mean, he only had one foul against Miami. He had 3 against Notre Dame, 2 against Pitt, so it hasn't really been a problem. But you run into some experienced big man that knows how to draw fouls, and Duke could find some trouble there. But I think overall, I mean, I think for Duke, getting a chance to play Pat and Ngongba down low, get him some minutes, and then experiment with Cooper Flagg at the small ball 5 too. It's not a terrible thing to have him leak out, even though his defense will obviously be missed.
Mm-hmm. And I know you've been impressed with Malich's development over this year, and he has been a phenomenal player. I agree. I think there's a couple things on defense, and then I'm actually going to talk about one thing on offense where I want to watch. But Mason Gillis played extended minutes against Miami. Obviously, he was 4 of 6 from deep, which helped his confidence a lot. But he's a similar player in the type that, he's going to dive on the floor, he's going to box out, and he's going to, get those tough rebounds. He had 4 against Notre Dame. He's such a talented player. He's too talented to be, to his levels of production earlier this year, but I think it's just a confidence thing for him. He started off just pretty cold from beyond the arc this year, and as he gets more playing time and as he is able to do that, he'll be an even bigger factor for this team. And I think in Ngongba, it's funny. He sometimes, he's new. He's obviously a freshman, and he's getting better and better, but his effort on the glass is really good. I've been impressed with the way he deflects rebounds too. Like he'll either tip it to himself or tip it out to someone, and he'll be falling out of bounds. And he doesn't look as menacing as some of the other senators that we had, but he's a really talented rebounder, at least, that can clean up the glass and fill that hole that Malik left. One thing that I'll be curious to look at offensively is Malik Brown served as a really good facilitator for that second unit at times, especially when he would get the ball at the top of the key and people would be cutting and he would make the right reads. And so I mean, against Miami, the offense was flowing very nicely. But I'm curious when maybe the second unit is in and if shots aren't falling, who kind of replaces his role? Does Shire, keep Con Knippel in a little bit more to try to get a passer? Or what does he do with that? Because I think Malik's impact on offense is something that is a little bit underrated as well. So TBD, but we'll see as far as that. So the next game for the Blue Devils is a contest against Boston College. They will play them. We're recording this on Friday, so tomorrow, Saturday, but 8 p.m. one on the road. Obviously, any game in the ACC on the road is a little bit difficult, but Boston College hasn't had a fantastic season to start under Earl Grant. What are you looking at for the Eagles and maybe, could they present any challenges for the Blue Devils tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far, but I think obviously the biggest thing for Boston College is no Quentin Post this year. Quentin Post was an absolute problem for every other center in the ACC when he was up in Massachusetts. But I think for Duke, it'll just be nice to have another game, and then they have a week off after this, so it's a good chance for Duke to go out, work on some things, experiment maybe with some lineups with Malik out now, maybe see a different kind of defense from Boston College than Miami, and then have a week off before Wake Forest to kind of prepare and reevaluate.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really, really new look Boston College team that had a lot of people leave and transfer out. They still have some guards that can score, but they just don't have the size, I think, to compete with Duke at all. So I agree. I don't think it should be too competitive, but a good chance for Ngongba and the other guys, like you said, to kind of impose their will on the kind of relatively small Eagles lineup as well. Okay, let's talk about the ACC a little bit. There's been a lot since we passed. I think I'll talk about what I think in a second, but we do our weekly stock up, stock down within the ACC. We'll start with that, and then we'll kind of branch off into a bigger ACC discussion. But Caleb, who's your stock up, stock down
Yeah, I don't even know if you're gonna
of the month?
I don't even know if you're gonna have a stock up. I don't. There might only be one.
There's a couple.
Um,
There's a couple.
But I'm gonna go with Louisville. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I think obviously Louisville the past 2 years has been the laughing stock of the ACC and maybe the Power Five at large. I thought Pat Kelsey was a good hire, and obviously it's paying off major. I mean, they brought in a whole new team, and they've gelled really well. I mean, here recently I think they lost to Kentucky, and since then they've been on an absolute tear. Um, Javon Hadley had 30 some against Clemson in a big ACC game. They just beat Pitt too. And so I think it might end up being Duke's toughest game ACC wise, in terms of like the seeding of a team or ranking of a team. And so I think I've just been really impressed with the Cardinals, and they don't have Duke again, so they have a pretty good chance to finish pretty high in the ACC. And then stock down, I'll go with NC State. Obviously, last year, come off the Final Four, new look, no DJ Burns. They just lost to Virginia Tech, which is pretty not ideal at home. They had a brutal last possession against North Carolina. Not Kevin Keats' finest moment. So yeah, I'll go with NC State. Stock down.
Yeah, those are good ones. I'm gonna go start with my stock down, and then I'll go stock up. I'm gonna go stock down Virginia. They're on a 4-game losing streak. 4-game losing streak. Sorry, 1-5 in the ACC. Obviously, with Tony Bennett stepping down, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty around that program. But there's a couple things that have stuck out to me about Virginia. One is they're just options on offense are a little bit more limited in the sense that they have good shooters, but just not a lot of. They don't have like a Kihei Clark or a Kyle Guy that can kind of, drive and space out the floor a little bit. So they run nice sets, but sometimes it's hard when you don't have that slasher to kind of complement the shooters. And then the Virginia defense just hasn't been what it normally is, giving up 88 to Stanford, 75 to Cal. Those are, fairly talented. They have talented offensive players on both of those teams, but still, that's more than a typical Virginia team would give. So yeah, stock down to Virginia. And then my stock up is Wake Forest. Duke will play Wake next Saturday on the road. Wake had kind of a interesting start to the season in the sense that the offense was just not there. It was a lot of like 50-point performances, even against Texas A&M scoring 44. And contrasting that with last year was really confusing and kind of what happened there. Of late, they're on a 4-game winning streak as opposed to a 4-game losing streak. And I think it's just a team coming together a little bit. Obviously, they're talented. You got Hunter Salas and Cam Hildreth, who is sometimes up and down with injury, but Hildreth is a talented player. And then I think Tyler Johnson coming in from Louisville is kind of a firecracker. He's a little bit up and down, but he can score, definitely. And then they're well coached. Wake Forest, Steve Forbes has done a phenomenal job there, and I think they can present a challenge to anyone and compete with about anyone in the league. So they're kind of my stock up. Elsewhere in the league, I don't know, other storylines that you're looking at? Any teams that you think played particularly well or not?
Man,
Sorry to put you on the spot.
no, I mean, I really thought Pittsburgh was going to be the ACC
Yeah, they've been a
matchup.
little tough.
Obviously against Duke, Lowe and Leggett were just kind of stifled.
Yeah.
But I mean, I still think Pitt has the chops to be a top 4 team in the ACC.
Mhm.
They definitely have the talent. SMU, I can't really get a read on. They didn't really play anybody in non-con, and
Mhm.
then Duke was like their big, we'll bring our recruits here and have this big tournament game, and then they got decimated. And so I can't really figure them out. I mean, they have a good record. They're 4-2 in conference play. And then I guess North Carolina they're 5-1 in conference play. So we'll talk about them next week, I'm sure. They have been coming on a lot stronger recently. I think Ian Jackson is a big part of that.
For sure.
Coming into his own. And but yeah, I mean, ACC wise, I think you can make a case that Duke might win ACC Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and Coach of the Year. So
Sweep the awards.
if that tells you how the ACC is going this year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I agree with one thing about UNC is I think Seth Trimble coming back also helps them a lot. I think there's been this now there's this division kind of between like the top and kind of the rest. And I think those teams at the top are actually playing pretty well. And I think the ACC can conceivably get 5 teams, maybe even a 6th, but probably about 5 in the tournament. Like you said, Louisville, I mean, is just on an absolute streak. And I think Pitt's lost 3 tough road games.
Yeah.
The Louisville game was at home, but a tough game nonetheless, but went to Tallahassee and lost. I still think they're going to bounce back a little bit. You didn't mention Clemson. Clemson's at 6-1 right now. I think the Tigers don't have the firepower really to beat Duke, I don't think. But it's another quality defensive team that if Ian Shefflin gets healthy, could challenge the top of the league and make a run in the tournament or the ACC tournament. I guess the NCAA as well.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, might as well. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that tier of Duke, Clemson, Louisville, Wake, UNC, and maybe either one of SMU, Florida State, Pitt can kind of really establish itself as like quality teams. Because all those teams are on win streaks right now and kind of separating itself. But like the mid to bottom tier of the ACC has just been abysmal.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it. I mean, Miami coaches retired midseason.
Yeah, a lot of turnover.
Boston. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these teams just don't have the same guys or like just new situations. Stanford.
I also think. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Stanford is really a team that I just like watching Stanford because Maxime Reynaud is spectacular.
And Jalen Blakes.
And
Ryan Agarwal in the starting
and Duke. Yeah, I mean, you get to see Jalen Blakes, who Duke fans are a big fan of. So they're right there below. They're the only team.
I think they're a good team.
They're above 500 still, and the rest of the teams are 8-9 or like whatever. But
I was just gonna say that Notre Dame is somebody to watch because like with Marcus Burton back, like they're just a completely different team, right? Like you can't take those first 10 games out the same or first however many games he missed within the context of what they're doing now. Got a nice win against Boston College to get some confidence after that tough NC State loss, but they've lost 2 1-point games against UNC and NC State. Lost the 8-point game against Duke where they really played incredible. And I think they can score. They can definitely make some noise. They got shooters across the board, and Marcus Burton and Braden Shrewsbury are one of the better backcourts in the league, in my opinion. So that's all I was going to say. Sorry to cut you off.
No, yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think we saw against Duke in that first half. It seemed like Duke might pull away, and then Burton and Shrewsbury started just throwing them in from everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, Marcus Burton was he was AC Freshman of the Year last year.
He was, yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously, he's got some talent, and they're 41st in offense in the country right now. So, I mean, they definitely have the firepower. Just the defense and the size is a little bit lacking.
Yeah. It should be interesting down the stretch, but curious to see is Duke going to trip up? Where would it be? We'll see. I think one test that is coming up quickly is at Wake Forest. That's going to be a tough test in UNC. So what we'll do is next week we'll preview the 3 North Carolina teams: Wake Forest, NC State, and North Carolina, which will all be in the span of 2 weeks. So that'll be a tough little stretch for the Blue Devils, but important, especially with Malik out. So definitely check out all of our content on the website. We've got our rivalry challenge, which will be starting in the next week or so, after next week. So on the website, we'll have a link to donate to the rivalry challenge if you can at all. That would be incredible. This is how we get a lot of our money for supporting student journalism for our budget. And so us and the Daily Tar Heel do kind of like a friendly competition, so you can raise the most. And then we also, in addition with the donations, do a rivalry print edition where we compile a bunch of features about the game. So I know we're working on some fun stories. It all should be a fun edition and definitely great content. So check all that out at DukeChronicle.com. Thank you so much. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and we're excited to be back. So thank you again for listening. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been the Cameron Chronicles.